Well, big prophet jewel of the day. This one's about common sense. So let's get right into it. When people use the phrase common sense, they're usually speaking about good judgment. I hear people say, "Oh, you gotta use your common sense. Common sense isn't common these days." You know? And they're just talking about good judgment. Now, when you use the word common, it kind of implies that it's popular or shared amongst many people. And I think the level of judgment and good sense isn't that common, or the kind that is common isn't the most useful or most effective, right? Now, good judgment, I have no problem with. But what I do have a problem with is settling, right? So I speak about this a lot, and about language. I speak about how the majority of the words we use, we assume the meaning based on the context of how it was used. So most of our language, the way we express our thoughts, are functioning off of assumptions. We don't really know the meaning. We're just assuming it. We're using our good judgment or common sense. We're just using common sense, right? So I spoke to a couple of friends of mine, asked them this question. I asked them if they knew what the word rhetorical meant, right? And they said, "What do you mean, like a rhetorical question?" They all said the same thing, right? And I was like, "Yeah," and it's like, well, I don't know what the actual meaning is, but I do think that it means that it doesn't need a response. Like a rhetorical question is when it doesn't need an answer. Right? So I said, okay, do you know what the word rhetoric means? Like some of them knew, some of them didn't, or some of them had an answer and some didn't. And long story short, I explained to them that the meaning of rhetoric means to persuade using words. Right? So a rhetorical question is not that it doesn't need a response. That's not the meaning of it. It means it's a question that is phrased to persuade. So that's why it doesn't need a response, because it's just to persuade you. And rhetorical is based on the word rhetoric, which was based on the Greek word rhetor. Right? That means to persuade with words. All right? So I thought, before I looked the word up, I thought the exact same thing that they thought. I thought that it just means, yeah, it doesn't need an answer. That's what rhetorical means. It needs no answer, needs no reply. All right? So we were all using common sense. And we were just using, the way we understood the word was based on the context of how it was used, which means like, hey, it's rhetorical. You don't need to answer it. Right? So we all making the same assumption. That's common. That was what was common, what was shared amongst us. But that wasn't the real meaning. That's not what it meant. So, like, what does that mean? Like, does that mean we're all wrong? And we had no idea? How many words are like that? Like, matter of fact, isn't society like that? Isn't society, I find it ironic, like rhetorical. I think society itself is rhetorical. Our politics is rhetorical. Our education system is rhetorical. We just accept things without question. And that's what's common. You know, we have a culture and a society that's built on not asking questions, not looking any further. It's built on assumptions and acceptance. Now, if we learn to look a little further, to ask more questions, to be more critical instead of just accepting the answers that were given to us or accepting assumptions, then we could develop a better understanding of the world that's going on around us. Now, I think it takes humility for one. We have to be humble and realize the lack of understanding that we really have, that the education that we were given only makes us capable of functioning on a certain level. Like, for me to understand what rhetorical meant, I had to break it down to rhetoric, and then I break that down to rhetor, which is a Greek word. So I found out the origins, and then I could rebuild it back up and have a better understanding. Reverse engineer it. So I reverse engineered the word. The etymology helped me reverse engineer it. So that brings me to another example I admire is Japan and the process of industrialization. So when they bought this train, they didn't have a train. They wanted to progress in development, and they saw the train would be something useful. But instead of depending on another nation and just trying to outsource it, they bought the train, broke it down, reverse engineered it, and rebuilt it. And then because they understood how it functioned, they were able to build a better one and build the best in the world. Now that's mastery. They developed mastery. They had to break it down to nothing and rebuild this shit. And now they can become an independent source and create it themselves. They're not dependent on someone else providing that to them. You know, they didn't assume, oh, we can't make it, someone else can make it. No, they was like, you know what, if they could do it, we could do it. And matter of fact, now that we know how to do it, we could do it better. So as a generation, and for the future generations, that's the attitude that we have to apply. And we have to apply it to society itself, I believe. I think we have to look at everything. I think this is like a new enlightenment era that's dawning right now. I think everything is changing and we have to rebuild it. And in order to rebuild it and not repeat the same problems, we have to reverse engineer and we have to understand the origins. We have to break it down and understand every part of it and then rebuild it back up. Just for understanding, like, because we're functioning, we're operating on only a functional level. We don't have any mastery. We don't have independence. We have just enough to be useful. You know what I mean? Now to have control and power and independence, we have to have understanding. We have to develop mastery. We can't rely on assumptions. You know, this society is rhetorical and it expects us to assume and just be pleased with the assumptions, yo. We can't expect to build a business and limit ourselves to the mindset of an employee. We have to learn how to build from the ground up and learn the lessons all along the way. You know, we can't just be we can't be satisfied with just being able to use the machine. We got to understand how the machine works enough to where we could build our own machine. You know what I mean? Like, we shouldn't just be consumers. We got to be creators. All right? And then we won't be common. You know, because common It's mediocrity, and that's lowering the bar for everybody. So I believe that society needs to raise the bar. I believe for our future depends on us developing a level of mastery. Common sense isn't good enough. Definitely ain't good enough anymore. You know? Let's be critical. Let's ask questions. Let's not assume that we understand it. Let's not trust our level of understanding so much that we won't ask questions. Like, yo, I'd rather hear dumb questions so I could hear a good, solid answer than just assume that I know everything. I've been looking up more words in the last year or two than I ever have, and the majority of the words are the ones that I've been using my whole life. And I came to a realization that I don't really understand what these words mean, the literal definition of these words. I've been functioning off of assumptions for years, and I don't want to continue to do that. So I'm building up my knowledge. I'm learning the etymology. I'm learning the origins of where these words come from. I'm trying to develop mastery, and that's why I want society to do. Let's not aspire to common sense. Let's aspire to critical thinking, asking questions, and leveling up. You know, there's no mastery never ends. Common sense is already you want to be at the finish line already. Nah, forget that, yo. Let's keep going. Let's progress further. All right. Peace and love, y'all.